And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Space and Johnson
with a cinema review.
A little earlier than that, July 31st, 2023, and thank you for joining me for another exciting episode of the Cinemasters Reviews. Weirdly themed movies this week. We have two ghost story movies, one being Disney's Haunted Mansion, as well as A24's Talk to Me. I say we jump right in, and joining me to review our first movie this evening, for the third time, Haunted Mansion expert himself, Caleb Coho. Coho, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to be here. So excited that there was no way anything was going to prevent me from being on the show for this one. So I'm excited to talk Haunted Mansion and take my conventional place at the whipping post for my opinions.
That's fair. You are always one to always stand by how you feel, and I do really appreciate you for that. But I say we jump right in. Haunted Mansion, directed by Justin Simien. This is the second adaptation of the famous ride in Disneyland, the first one being Rob Minkoff's 2003 film starring Eddie Murphy. This one is about this one is about astrophysicist Benjamin, played by Lakeith Stanfield. He has essentially made his living trying to communicate with spirits and try to figure out why they are here. And he is called by a mother and a son. The mother, Gabby, played by Rosario Dawson, to, as you might suspect, the Haunted Mansion, where if you are to step foot in there, you are haunted by spirits, and strange goings begin to happen. Coho, why don't you give everyone a quick rundown, both your opinions on the ride and the IP of the Haunted Mansion as a whole?
Sure. So I really love the Haunted Mansion. It's right next to Pirates of the Caribbean in terms of geographical location and in my heart as to what my favorite rides at Disney are. Payson will tell you, getting to go with everyone and like having Bowman's first experience on it was going to be really exciting for me. And then it wasn't the traditional one. It was the Nightmare Before Christmas one. I was very disappointed. But I adore the story and the lore of that ride. I love all the different names that you see out front. I love the different sort of experiences you have going through the house. And I love the combination of humor and horror that ride gives you. And I think this movie does a good job of capturing that spirit as well. Actually, in really surprising ways. I thought it was a little bit scarier than I would have expected in sort of the way some of the stuff is presented. But I really love the idea of there being a spooky house with 999 happy haunts that I love that they incorporated again in this one. So I like the original. I would say I love this version. So
there, yeah, like you, I really, really love that ride. I think that ride in Disneyland, I think it does a great job of capturing both the horror and the comedy of certain elements. I love the ride starts while you are literally in line and you get the entire atmosphere of it. I think that movie is fun. The original 2003 movie is fun. I would not defend it, but I definitely have a really fun time while watching that movie. And while something like Pirates of the Caribbean, like this is not the first time Disney has taken one of their rides and translated onto film. And while a movie like Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, definitely like transcends the ride and puts a lot of like story and character into it, this was a really good job at imitating the ride and capturing looks. And there are a ton of Easter eggs in there. But my issue is you can put as many little references into your movie as you want. You can you can make it for the fans, but that's not how you make a good movie. And watching this movie, I just felt a little bit dull and a little bit flat, and I wish I wish I just cared a little bit more for the characters. The one really great element I will say about this movie is I think Lakeith Stanfield is excellent as the lead, and if it wasn't, I would like this movie a lot less. I think his motivations for why he does this, I think, are great. When we're first introduced to him, we see him. It's never said where the movie takes place. My guess.
No, it is. No,
it
100% is. The very first line of the movie, which is my favorite twist on it, is "Welcome, foolish mortals, to New Orleans."
Okay,
it's my favorite like zigzag, because the first one opens with "Welcome, foolish mortals, to the haunted mansion," the way the ride does, and this one just starting and then immediately left turning. I loved it. So yeah.
Yeah, we open on him being like this walking tour guide in New Orleans, and he kind of just hates his job. He's just sort of mundanely going through as we see his backstory. It weirdly is kind of emotional. What do you think about Lakeith Stanfield in this movie, Coho?
I think he's phenomenal. And I think his character and his story is the emotional heart of this movie that I connected to so deeply. For people who don't know, I have written a Haunted Mansion treatment myself. And there was a lot. So I have a deep attachment to that version that doesn't exist. So going into this one, I was really pleasantly surprised at how many similar ideas this movie has to the one I would have done. And I definitely loved seeing them kind of go the route of using grief as the central conceit of the film, which I think is the only natural way to tell a story in the Haunted Mansion. I think using a very bitter, broken person as a protagonist is a great choice, because all you can do from there is put them in the situation where they have to confront death and their mortality and find reasons to live. To put someone who has no reason to live in a situation where death is on the line, I think is a phenomenal juxtaposition, and Lakeith just steps up and it's a home run with it. I love his character a lot, down to the ending. I cried. I will not afraid to admit I did cry watching Haunted Mansion at his final moment with the Hatbox Ghost. So
that's fair. Yeah. When the movie was focused on Lakeith Stanfield's character, that is when I was the most invested. Can't really say the most that about the other members of the cast. And I think the major issue is I don't think all of them really realized they were in the same movie, just based on the different levels of performances we get. Rosario Dawson seems to be kind of sleepwalking through this movie as Gabby. She's sort of like the main crux is to get everyone there. And on the other hand, I think Tiffany Haddish, who plays like a psychic in this movie, I think her performance was honestly kind of embarrassing. Like, she just seems way too over the top, and she was the one that a lot of the jokes were being thrown at, and just very few of them were sticking. Owen Wilson, I think, is fine. He's kind of doing the Owen Wilson shtick as this priest for hire character who brings Benjamin to the mansion. There's kind of an interesting arc with that character. Very simple arc there. Danny DeVito, I always love Danny DeVito, and he's very much doing the Danny DeVito thing, which is always kind of enjoyable. What did you think about the cast as a whole? Because I was not the biggest fan of this.
I don't think all of them are necessary to the story, but I don't think anyone is hurting it. I think DeVito and Owen Wilson are very fun. I really enjoyed both of them. The sketch artist scene, which was in the trailer, I laughed just as hard at in the movie. I thought that was very well done. I think DeVito and Lakeith are great improvers off each other. You can tell they're just kind of having fun. I think Owen Wilson is having a blast, and anytime he and Lakeith play off each other, I think they're having fun. I wouldn't say Rosario Dawson's sleepwalking. I just think that's Rosario Dawson. I think she's doing what she does in every movie and every performance, except in Kevin Smith movies where she's asked to be manic, or in Rent where she's asked to be manic. I think those are kind of the only modes she has, is Rosario Dawson being Rosario Dawson or being Rosario Dawson on manic mode. And I think that she's fine. I don't think she's a hurt or anything. I think that she's pretty solid. I think the son, I think his name is something, Chase Dillon, I think is the kid's name. Yeah. I think he's really good. I think there's a future with that kid. I think he is so solid in so many parts, and his relationship with the Keith is great. I don't think Tiffany Haddish is necessarily bad. I just think she can be a lot, and I don't think a lot is bad. I just think a lot is. I think she's just playing it very big, and that's not going to work for everyone. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I just kind of accepted that Tiffany Haddish was in the movie doing her thing, and sometimes it worked for me, and sometimes it didn't. But I wouldn't say she was an absolute embarrassment or anything. I just think she's kind of doing the same thing we've seen Tiffany Haddish do and everything.
I think the two actors that are definitely very clearly there for the paycheck were Jamie Lee Curtis and Jared Leto. They are the ones that definitely have like their characters are important. Jamie Lee Curtis sort of plays like an old psychic of the house, and we really only see her from the head throughout the movie. And Jared Leto has no reason to be in this movie. He is the person that plays the voice of the Hatbox Ghost. You never see his face; you just hear his voice, and he's okay. But I was just like, why are we getting these people in these roles? What did you think about those two performances?
I think Madame Leota is one of the most important characters to nail in the Haunted Mansion because she is the most iconic character in the ride, and you have to do Madame Leota in the Haunted Mansion movie. And when you stack it up against Jennifer Tilly, who I think is honestly phenomenal in the first one, I think she really crushes it in the original. It's kind of embarrassing that you get Oscar winner Jamie Lee Curtis, and she is not remarkable in the part, and I was really disappointed by her. Because Leota's supposed to be a little whimsical and a little off, and Jamie Lee Curtis is just giving me nothing. I think this is Jared Leto's best performance of his career. You know why? You can't hear him, you can't see him. I think Jared Leto's a terrible actor, but I think this is the best he's ever been because they modified the hell out of his voice, and I like the voice they chose to modify his voice into. I like the voice of the Hatbox Ghost a lot. I think the Hatbox Ghost is actually a really good villain and a really fun choice to make the villain. That I never actually considered that idea. I think the Hatbox Ghost and the relationship of that character to the ride's history as being on it and then removed from it and then brought back and he's not on every version of every ride. I think that's such a fun person to then pin as the villain of your movie. He's such a scary design on top of that too, so I think that's a great choice. I think you could have gotten like a good voice actor to do it, but like at the end of the day, I don't think the Hatbox Ghost is bad in any way. I think he's actually very good. I just think Jared Leto's not the reason that performance is anything. I just think that Jared Leto's performance is the vessel in which we get this really great character, or this really great villain to me, or at least a very spooky villain. But I don't like Jared Leto, so I'm fine with him basically just being a stock voice.
I kind of want to push back on something you're saying. I get that like you definitely seem like you are bringing a lot of your like history with the ride into certain members of these characters, and I just didn't see what you obviously saw with the Hatbox Ghost. I just thought he was a kind of a generic like final threat in this movie. We're really only introduced to him like physically towards the like beginning of the third act of this film, and I just think you could have done just maybe a little bit more with that.
I love how like I love how he haunts in the first scene, and you get the silhouette at the end of the prologue, and then you get that character through the hallways, and you get that character in like sort of a lot of apparent ways, and he makes himself physically known at the end. But I do think that character is menacing without ever actually physically appearing in a lot of ways, where I feel the menace of a Hatbox Ghost a lot. And I think the movie does that really well, in a way that I think that character's design only emphasizes the scary presence he's bringing in the first two acts.
I'm willing to get on with you where I think when you don't see him, I think he does create kind of a more threatening aura, but then it just has that effect where when you do finally see it, it's like, okay, I kind of get that. What was your opinion on the production design as a whole? Because I'll be honest, I'm just having this issue with a lot of Disney movies as of recently where they're all just sort of looking the same, and I just didn't find the design of the mansion all that thrilling in general. Like, it didn't look bad, but it just sort of looks like a CGI conglomerate that we're getting from a lot of their movies recently.
So I think my issue with this movie is just the way Disney is kind of hiring stock cinematographers to make everything look the same. Because I think the set is really cool. I think the mansion itself is designed as a really cool live replica of what the ride is. They get the wallpapers, they get the paintings, they get the vibe of like an abandoned house down pat. I think that they nail it in terms of the sets they built. I think what I don't like is how it's lit and how it's shot. It feels a lot like a lot of their remakes and a lot of their live action. I feel like they just keep getting like, I don't know, like their own Matthew Libatique to keep coming in and shooting everything over and over and over. But like I don't necessarily love. I think the camera work was actually really good. Like the different angles and the different shots they create, I think are pretty cool. I just don't necessarily like the lighting. I think my big issue with the movie visually is just that I'll give you by the end when we go outside and we're clearly in a CGI cemetery. I did not enjoy it, but well.
Yeah, I think just something that I was just kind of disappointed by with this movie is something I do enjoy with that original film is you get both the mansion and the like area surrounding it. And this one, like the mansion is okay, but like when you finally go outside in the third act, that's where it just feels like you're seeing like a CGI vortex of like all these like different ghosts, which like I should be interested in it, but like I just didn't find the designs all that interesting in general. I think when it comes to like the pacing of this movie, I think I was kind of in for the first two acts, like where we are just like in the mansion, we're discovering like who the good spirits that are haunting these characters are, who the bad spirits are. But I think by the end, where I think I had two major issues with the third act of this film. One, like I said, I think the final battle with the Hatbox Ghost does kind of just become like that big CGI conglomerate, like vortex of all these like faceless enemies like coming at the characters, and it takes a lot to really get invested in that. And two, and maybe this is just when the movie is coming out. I've seen so many movies this summer, specifically blockbusters, where a large part of the plot comes down to we have half of an item and we need to go and find the other half of the item. And they did that with Transformers Rise of the Beast. They did that with Dead Reckoning Part 1. And now they're doing it with Haunted Mansion. And it's not done like horribly in this, but just the fetch quest style nature of certain blockbusters I'm just getting a little tired of. Did any of those elements bother you in any way?
I think what bothered me most about the pacing is just that we have to go to Crumb's mansion very late in the game.
Yeah.
I feel like the resolution of like, okay, now we need to go get this comes in really late. I feel like that could have been set up a little bit better in the first two acts, that we need something to exercise the ghost. I feel like they kind of come to that point late. Though I do want to give a shout out to Crumb's Mansion because the design for that is the Florida Haunted Mansion. I love that. I love that I love that the design of the mansion is clearly the Disneyland one, but the one that they go to that is the Hatbox Ghost Manor is the Florida one. So that you get both haunted mansions in the movie. I thought that was a nice touch. But I do think that like there's definitely a pacing issue with the third act for me that I don't love, and that really knocks it down a half star a lot. That's really my big issue. One of my two really big issues, I guess. But it wasn't enough for me to like walk out of that and go, man, I didn't love that, or man, I didn't enjoy it. It was just I felt like at the end of the day, I love the first two acts so much that when we get to the third act, it falters a bit, but I don't hate the third act. I still enjoy what we're getting. I just don't necessarily enjoy the visual elements of a couple of the things that happen in that act.
No, yeah, that's absolutely fair. Once again, like I seem to just be like using this movie to like give like an ire to all like my issues with a lot of major Disney movies recently. Did this plot need to be two hours? Like I think you probably could have shaved like 15, 20 minutes off this runtime. Like the original one was less than 90 minutes, and you can probably go a little longer than that. But like maybe like towards the middle, like cut off like a little bit in the middle, or maybe even like during the ending. Like maybe if we get to Crumb Mansion like a little earlier in this movie, I think you have a much more compact film. What did the runtime feel like for you, Coho?
I think the runtime got to be a little bit by the end. I feel like there's definitely elements you could have streamlined or maybe changed what you were actually doing. I think the idea of I think they kind of, the second act feels a bit redundant. We kind of repeat ourselves a lot in the second act, and I feel like you can be more concise. I feel like you can change the action up a little bit. I feel like we had too many seances. I think you need to have one seance for Leota and the one seance that causes the possession. I think those are important. I think there's maybe one or two like quick cut scenes where it's like, you don't need that. I feel like the crux of the action for me, that really the big thing I was bummed about is how little we actually see ghosts in the movie. Yeah. Because the Haunted Mansion has so many incredible ghost designs. And I think the biggest fatal flaw for this movie is that we don't see them because they make it so you don't see ghosts in the human world, but you can see it in the ghost world. So when his spirit leaves his body, he then sees all the ghosts. And you're like, this is really cool. And I wish they had just decided that once you set foot in the manor, you can see the ghosts. Because I understand why they don't, because you want to be able to keep the Hatbox Ghost like a visual mystery and a threat. But I feel like the thing you could have done is you could have married it with what they do in the first one, where they had like the Wallace Shawn ghost, who's like really fun and a fun supporting character. So you have at least one ghost to help them through the house, and then you have the one ghost chasing them through the house that's like a villain, which is what happens in my draft, I guess, is that exact idea. But like, I would have loved to have been part of the ghost world and like experienced the hitchhiking ghosts more. And like, that's what I like a lot about the 2003 version is like, they like are driving and the hitchhiking ghosts are there, or like in the hearse, and the hitchhiking ghosts are suddenly in the hearse with them, and they're like, he can't see us, and he's like, I'm looking right at you. Like, I love those little moments from the first one that I feel like this one doesn't really have because the ghosts are not really characters. No. And that bums me about how the characters aren't necessarily ghosts, and then we don't see them. But I did enjoy the big element where he like has the part where he goes through and you see all the different ghosts in the cemetery. So I did enjoy that. So they are here. You see them. I get enough of their actions to satisfy me, but that's the thing I was a little bummed at is how little we actually see the ghost.
There's one ghost we're introduced in the movie where they essentially like feel like an embodiment of like water, and we kind of learn that like they have one goal and they'll help our main characters for that. But yeah, like you said, the ghosts don't really have a character in this movie. I think just my major issue with this movie when I think back on this film, it just feels flat. Like, it just feels kind of dull, and like I can't find too many things I think are really bad about this movie, but it all just sort of like comes up to like this bowl of like mediocrity where I'm just like, I just didn't enjoy it that much. Before we head into our final rating, is there anything you want to bring up about this movie?
I don't know. I guess I really enjoy the actual like commitment I think Justin Simeon had to trying to get the Haunted Mansion right. Like Rob Minkoff obviously had that too. And I think I like that even if they are company men directors, they have a dedication to the property and telling a fun story that honors the property. And I think that Justin Simeon did that for me. I feel like he got as close as he could with what he had, with the version of the script he had, with the version of the movie he was going to make. I like what I got. Again, the perfect version of this movie will always just exist in my brain. And that's unfair for me to judge a movie on is a movie that doesn't exist by comparing a movie that exists to a movie that doesn't. But I would say on the whole, I might grade Haunted Mansion in general a little bit more on a curve than most people, but I really did have a good time with the movie. So I'll give Justin Simeon that.
No one can fault you for having a good time with the movie, and I would never fault anyone for having a good time with any movie. Coho, here at Cinemasters Reviews, we do rate movies on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is absolutely abysmal. 10 is absolutely incredible. You know what? Usually I ask the guests to go first.
Sure.
I think I think your score is probably going to be a little bit more interesting than mine. So if you're okay, could I give my score first?
Go for it. Yeah, you're sure.
I think the more I sit on this movie, I cannot call it a bad film, but I cannot call it a good film either. I'm going to go, honestly, right in the middle. I'm giving it 5 out of 10 videotapes. I think it's just kind of a mediocre movie. I think the more I think about it, I try to remember like specific things, and it all does come back to Lakeith Stanfield's character, who I do think is excellent. I think he's giving just the right amount of energy to make this movie worth watching. If he wasn't in this movie, I would probably drop it down a little lower. But I think the more I think about it, I think I am going to give it 5 out of 10 videotapes. If you do end up watching this movie, I don't think you're going to hate it. I don't think you're going to hate your time. You might even end up in enjoying it. But I don't really see the need to rush out to go see this in theaters. Coho, what would you give this movie on a scale of 10 videotapes?
I think right now I'm sitting at 8 out of 10 on videotapes. I'm very high on it. I really enjoyed my time with it. I think there's a lot of worthwhile ideas being presented in this movie. I like the idea of Disney kind of exploring grief. They don't really do that in films. They try and keep things happy. I think Haunted Mansion is actually one of the most mature movies they've done in terms of what they're actually talking about. I think nothing has moved me more than the kid talking to his dad or thinking that he's talking to his dad, and Lakeith Stanfield breaking down in the cemetery. I just think there's a lot there for me to really love on an emotional level. And of course, for me, all the different references to the rides, all the different set pieces centered around the ride, all the different little lines of dialogue that call back to the ride, I love. It is definitely better than The Secret Invasion. But I would say I enjoy it all the way down to the dumb smile I had on my face when we end with some grim grinning ghosts. I was so excited. So I like this movie a lot.
That's absolutely fair. Yeah. Once again, like I said, the references to the ride didn't really quite do it for me, but I totally understand that if you are a diehard fan of this ride, you might be able to find something that certain other people didn't find. Koho, I know you were in a hurry tonight. I'm so happy I was able to get your thoughts on this film. I really wanted to get you as a guest for this movie. Before you leave, is there anything you would like to plug?
Check me out at Multiplex and Filmography. We are in the middle of the Danny DeVito series, so perfect tie-in with this Haunted Mansion episode. So we love Danny DeVito right here on the radio.
Koho, thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank you once again, Koho, for joining us. And yeah, like he said, they are covering Danny DeVito on Filmography, his directorial efforts. He has one of the more interesting filmographies when it comes to actors turned director. So I'd recommend you watch him and Boatman discuss that. But speaking of children, speaking to deceased relatives of theirs as spirits, wow, that's a transition. We are going to be moving into our next film, Talk to Me. And joining me for the first time on this show, one of my favorite people to talk about movies with. He is Dylan. Dylan, do you have a nickname? I forget.
I think Ko started calling me Vicious Dylan Van Thine.
Dylan Vicious Van Thine.
I still to this day have no idea where that nickname came from.
Fair. Dylan, I'm so happy to have you on tonight. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I'm a little bummed you didn't go for the obvious joke with just saying, Dylan, talk to me, to start this off. But you know what? Fair, because there's low-hanging fruit, so I understand. Yeah, it should be a good time. Excited to be on. Thank you for having me.
Of course, Dylan. Yeah, let's jump into our second movie, Talk to Me, directed by Danny, I hope I don't pronounce these last names right, Danny Filippo and Michael Filippo.
Filippo, but I'm not quite sure.
Filippo.
Okay.
Yes, Danny and Michael Filippo. This is about a group of teens that have found a like prop hand that when you hold it and you say "talk to me," you gain. It gives you the ability to have spirits enter your body, and you can do a lot of things with that, as you might expect. Not everything goes well when you do that because spirits can be scary. Dylan, going into this movie, I knew there was a lot of hype coming out of, I believe, one of the early festivals this year. And of course, A24 just has a brand with these horror movies. What were your thoughts heading into this movie, Dylan?
It's interesting because the directors of the movie, I knew them from way back in the day. They're actually former YouTubers. I think their channel's name is Rocker or something like that. YouTubers out of Australia basically who made these like horror short films, very edgy ones. And I know there was one specifically that I remember from when I was younger where it's like Ronald McDonald in like a playground or something just murdering a bunch of kids, and that scared me a lot bad as a kid. So like when I did more research, when I found out about this movie and I found that, it was like a core memory unlocked. It was crazy. So yeah, it's interesting, I guess, just to see that like the newest, just like more and more like YouTubers, like, and people from the YouTube generation getting into films. So that's interesting. I hadn't really kept up much with like the buzz coming from like film festivals. I really just like knew about it from the trailer, and I thought it looked like it could be interesting, but it also looked like slightly more generic, I'd say, of a horror film that I'm used to seeing from A24. But in a way, I actually think that's actually all right. Like, we'll get into it more when we go into the movie, but I think it's cool to see them doing more like broadly accessible horror films like this. Like, also last year you had X, which is basically just a really good slasher film, nothing too quote unquote elevated about it, even though I hate that term a lot. But yeah. No, I definitely do not like the term elevated horror. I barely even know what it means, if I'm being honest. But watching the trailer for this movie, I was very intrigued. Weirdly, the A24 horror movie this reminded me of was kind of Bodies, with how it looked like it was really going into like the Zoomer panic of everything. And watching this movie, if I'm being honest,
I think part of that Zoomer panic was kind of what prevented me from really getting into the first half of this film. Not to sound like in old like to preface something, I am part of Gen Z. I was born in '97, which is the oldest members of Gen Z. I'm 25 years old, and watching just some of the things these teens were doing, I maybe it's just the fact that my lifestyle is so far removed from all these things, but just the idea of having this hand that all these that if you touch it, you literally have like spirits possess you and your eyes change different colors and you just start talking in a weird voice. And then just having all these teens be like, yo, this is so cool, want to do it again. I think there was just a part of me that just felt like a little disconnected from that. Maybe it's just the lifestyle thing. Like I don't want to seem like I'm super like I am very, very uncool to be clear. But I think that's just something that prevented me from really loving the first half of this film. Dylan, how did you connect with like the first half, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
I thought it got off to an interesting start at first. I definitely had a bit of a similar feeling at first with like how the characters were written at first. Like when they introduce Riley and his friend, who I can't remember the name of him, with the dialogue that they had there when he's on like Snapchat as well, I was like, oh man, this definitely which is weird coming from, again, someone from like the YouTube generation or whatever, because like it definitely felt like someone in their 40s writing dialogue for a Gen Z person. But yeah, overall, I didn't have a problem with them like using the hand, obviously, when it is clearly like that dangerous or whatever. I think like it's like definitely a leap a bit from reality, but I also know that there are definitely some people like that would gravitate to doing dumb shit like that, because there's people like that. Sorry, can I swear on this?
Yeah, you're
okay,
fine.
Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure at first. I'm a very vulgar person, but yeah.
Yeah. Two questions for you. One, if you were at a party, would you use the talk to me hand? And two, if you saw someone use it and you saw what this hand can do, would you go back to another party at this person's house?
I'd probably be interested enough to like stick around and watch, but I don't know if I'd necessarily go back though, because it'd probably be pretty traumatizing now that I think about it. But I don't know. I might just like go to another room and play beer pong or something.
I enjoy that energy. But no, something I do love about this movie is when when certain threats of what the hand can essentially do is introduced. That's when I started getting really, really into the movie. Without going into super heavy spoilers, there's a point where one of the main characters tries using the hand, and they are maybe a little bit too susceptible to the spirits, where the spirits just absolutely start like destroying their body from the outside in. One of the characters starts realizing they can speak to deceased members of their family, which does a really great job of finally like showing, okay, this is why someone would want to use the hand, because that is a motivation I can completely understand from like a character perspective. Something I really enjoyed about this movie was how it sets up its characters. Our main character is named Mia, who is played by Sophia Wilde. Like I said, her mother has passed away, and she has sort of a distant relationship with her father. She spends a lot of time with her best friend and her brother. The movie also shows that she might be in love with her best friend's boyfriend. What did you think about the characters as a whole, Dylan?
The characters as a whole, I thought were pretty well done. I mean, yeah, I think the relationship with her deceased family member, as you alluded to, I don't know. Are we going to do a spoiler discussion later on with this or no?
Let's keep it light on spoilers.
All right, we'll keep it light. Yeah, but I thought that was really well handled, and it made that's, I think, one of the important things to do with horror movies is to make like the intentions of the characters like understandable, so they're not just like morons. Like you completely understand why, because they establish the rules of how everything works really well, of like the time limit of how long you have with like to touch the hand basically before stuff starts going bad. And when they do eventually like go over that, it's like they give really good reasons for why that would happen. which I thought was really well done. I think the stuff with her father was like, it could have been done a bit better, especially with when stuff happens in the third act. I think it should have landed harder, I think, than it ended up actually landing, in my opinion. Like, it almost felt like maybe there was a couple scenes missing that could have made it land a bit harder, but I don't know.
Yeah, this movie has an hour 35-minute runtime, and I rarely say this about movies. I kind of wish maybe we had a little bit more time with the characters to like really establish relationships, because yeah, like you said, I always kind of teetered back on Mia's relationship with her dad as to whether, like, is this a really bad relationship, or is this just like a tricky relationship? And I don't think the movie ever really decided where those characters really lie. Something that a lot of horror movies can that I just don't enjoy about a lot of horror movies is the cheap jump scare. Like, it's an easy tactic to get like an easy scare out of some people, and some certain movies do it well. A lot of movies don't do it well. I think the scares in this movie were actually really, really well done, because I think it earns it, and I think how it handles the visual element of these scares is really, really effective. Dylan, were you like me, where like this movie actually kind of got under your skin in a way?
A little bit. I think maybe my favorite sequence in the film in terms of the scares was like, there's one where she is just back at her home after like this traumatic night that they've just had, and then she has like there's basically a nightmare sequence, to sum it up in a way, and how they show like this creature just in the shadows, where you don't even see it at first until it starts to move and like come closer to you. That scene was like legitimately frightening. I was like, wow, that was really, really well done, the way that they did that. Yeah, as a whole, I was pretty happy with how creepy it was, because I don't really get freaked out by much horror movies, just for how much I've seen. But yeah, overall, I was pretty happy with the scares in the movie. Even though I think maybe there was one moment at the beginning of the film where I was like, are they going to do too many of these like fake out scares or whatever? Where there was a moment where a girl's just listening to music and gets hit in the back of the head with a pillow, and for some reason they add like a very loud musical sting to it, and I was like, what was in that pillow? It sounded like she got hit in the head with like a baseball bat. It was weird.
I don't know. No, when I was watching that, it sounds like an Indiana Jones punch.
Yeah.
Like was there like cement in that pillow? Like,
yeah. At first I was like, wait, was that a pillow she got hit with?
Yeah. No, that one was very, very strange. But yeah, as this movie goes on, when we start seeing more and more of what the possession can do, when we start seeing how, as I said, there's a character that gets completely just taken over by one of the spirits, and it's because they did not follow the rules. And like you said, I love horror movies that do have that set up the rules really, really well. I love that this movie shows like, hey, the reason why the spirit was able to get into this person's body is because these rules that are very, very integral to the game were broken. And I just found that very, very interesting. If I would say there's one part during the second half that I wasn't a big fan of, there comes a point where characters start like going into like, I guess what I would only describe as like a spirit realm. And I think when you start doing that in a movie, I think you need a really, really like focused director to make that like not confusing for the audience. A movie that came out a few weeks ago, Insidious: The Red Door. That's all that movie is. And I'll be honest, like the entire like second half of that movie, I was like, wait, what's going on? What realm are we in? It's not that confusing, but I would admit there are certain parts during that aspect of the movie where I was a little bit lost with what was going on. Did you have those issues, Dylan?
No, I don't think so. I for the most part, I understood what was going on, but I mean, one of the things that I like had issue with in the second act was like, I would be interested to hear if you thought the same thing. There's like, once one character is like hospitalized, I'll say that. I thought, oddly enough, the makeup was like not great, to be honest. Like, it kind of just looked like, to me, it took me out of it, because it kind of just looked like a rubber mask the guy was wearing, and I was like, it was one of those things that just took me out of it, and I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm watching a movie. You know, it was weird. But,
no, yeah. Now that you do say it, the makeup effects were not the greatest in this film.
Yeah.
This movie had a budget of $4.5 million, which is pretty low. All things considered, A24 usually don't spend like a ton of money on their movies like this, and that's how they get profit. So all props to them. But yeah, like you said, when you do see those scenes, it definitely does feel like you are watching a movie, because it just feels like there's just like a layer like stopping you from believing like what's going on. Now that you do admit that, I'm like, yeah, that was part of the second half that I think did bring it down a little bit. The one thing I will say is the actual building to like the climax of this film with what has to be done. I think that was excellent, like phenomenally done all the way to the ending, which I think the ending like shot of this film is awesome. Like I'm just like, if that's where we are left. I love that, and I just love how this movie kind of comes full circle with that. What did you think about like the ending in general of this film, Dylan?
Oh, really great. I mean, yeah, it's one that I wasn't really expecting them to go there, but it was like just the perfect like just button on the end of the film. Again, I like. I guess I can't really say because that'd be spoilers, but yeah, I thought it was a really strong way that they ended the film, and yeah, stuck the landing. There were some plot threads that I thought were left hanging maybe a bit that I would have liked to, have more closure to, but the actual like just straight up ending I thought was great.
No, 100%. Before we head into our final ratings for the show, is there anything you want to bring up about this movie that we haven't already discussed?
Yeah, I would be interested to ask you, like, did you think that the love triangle really added much to the movie overall? Because that's one of the things that I felt was like a little bit undercooked by the end of it. Like, it didn't really add much to the story overall.
I really thought that was going to be going somewhere, especially with how the love triangle, like, I think it's set up fairly well, and I think it has its like what you think is building towards a climax in the second half when like Mia and Riley's boyfriend start or Riley's sister's boyfriend starts like hanging out more, and like you think like, okay, this is really gonna like come to a front, but it just weirdly didn't. And when I first watched the movie, I was like, that kind of bothered me, but the more I thought about it, I guess considering everything that the movie was setting up to that point, maybe the characters just had worse things to worry about at that moment, that I guess they really just couldn't worry about, like, hey, are you cheating? Are you not? But like, yeah, as you said, if it's not going to amount to anything, why really add it? And so yeah, I definitely do think that is a little bit of a negative when all things considered.
Yeah, and I mean, I also enjoyed, because I've mentioned a lot of nitpicks I have with this, but I also enjoyed like how this movie, like a lot of parallels have been made also to like drug addiction, basically, with the themes of this movie. And like I thought that was really well done, because like a lot of great horror movies, it sort of like draws from like real life fears and anxieties and just hardships that people experience in real life. And I think this movie does that in like a very tasteful way. It doesn't go overboard with it, but it's like you could also tell, like, even like with her relationship with her father and like how distant they are, and how he doesn't really know what his daughter's like doing half the time, where she's always leaving the house and stuff. And like, yeah, just the peer pressure and all the like stuff dealing with that, I thought was really well handled, and just added like another extra layer of fear. So yeah,
like I think about that first scene where we see the first possession, and the first possession's like wild, like it's not like, oh man, is this happening, is this not happening? No, the movie very clearly shows, no, there are ghosts in this world, and we're not going to like spend time being like, is this real or not? But like the second the character gets out of their seance, they're like, that was awesome, let's do it again. And I think that's like a really good like parallel with drug addiction, as you say, where like, yeah, it's not good for you, but people just seem to enjoy doing it. So yeah. Dylan, we do review movies here on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 videotapes is awful. 10 videotapes is incredible. On a scale of 0 to 10, and you can go half videotapes, what would you give this movie?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really rock solid, just straight up like demon possession movie. Like it's not like groundbreaking or anything. It's just like a really solid horror film that I would like to. It makes me interested in seeing what the directors would do next. I would go. I know I was between 3.5 and 4 stars on Letterboxd, so I'll go. I can go half, right? You said.
Yeah, half.
So I'll go 7.5 then.
7.5 videotapes, absolutely. I'm just gonna leave this up because I'm also gonna go 7.5 videotapes. I think this is a really solid, good horror movie. Does a great job building to an exciting climax. Doesn't always like hold your attention the entire time. A little bit of a rocky start. Probably isn't going to be like an all-time classic for me, but I do think if you do enjoy horror movies, this is going to get the job done. And yeah, if you are a horror fan, I would recommend going to see this in theaters because you do have some really thrilling, scary moments. But yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of our show. Dylan, thank you so much for reviewing Talk to Me with me tonight. Before you leave, is there anything you would like to plug?
No, I don't really have a lot going on. Just check out Multiplex Movie Melee. Good times.
Absolutely, Multiplex. Dylan's one of our head writers and does a lot of great job. Help keep this channel running. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the video store. Next week we are going to be reviewing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, as well as the Meg 2 The Trenches. I really hope I can get Nazario on for Mutant Mayhem. There are some weird things with the Panama release of that film, but hopefully we can get him on. But yeah, thank you all for watching. And until next week, have a great night.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.